They say you never really know someone until you watch them walk away from everything they built. I learned that the hard way, standing in a mansion that was never mine, wearing a ring that meant nothing, listening to the woman who was supposed to be my family call me the help in front of 50 people who laughed like it was the punchline of the year. That was the night I stopped being Maya Chen, the wife. That was the night I became something they'd regret losing. The champagne flutes clinked like tiny bells of judgment as I stood frozen in the marble foyer of the Whitmore estate, my hands still gripping the silver tray I'd been carrying. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, then quickly away, pretending they hadn't just witnessed my public execution. The laughter rippled through the crowd like a disease, infecting every corner of the grand ballroom where my husband's family was throwing yet another one of their ridiculous charity galas. Honestly, darling, Victoria Whitmore's voice carried across the room with the kind of precision that comes from years of cutting people down to size. If we'd known you were going to treat Maya like stuff, we would have just hired actual caterers. At least they know their place. My mother-in-law stood there in her custom Dior gown, diamonds dripping from her neck like frozen tears, smiling at her own cruelty. The woman next to her, some socialite whose name I'd probably been told but never bothered to remember, laughed so hard she snorted champagne. Behind them, my husband Daniel stood with his arm around his assistant/mistress, Amber, a blonde 23-year-old who looked at me with something between pity and triumph. I'd known about Amber for 6 months. The late nights at the office, the texts that made him smile in ways I hadn't seen in years, the perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his shirts. I'd known, and I'd said nothing, because I was too busy being the backbone of a family that saw me as the skeleton they wanted to keep hidden in the closet. Maya, sweetheart, while you're up, could you be a dear and refresh my drink? Victoria extended her empty glass toward me, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. That is what you do best, isn't it, serving others? 4 years. I'd given this family 4 years of my life, 4 years of organizing their events, managing their household drama, smoothing over Daniel's business mistakes, playing therapist to his neurotic sister, and pretending I didn't notice how they introduced me at parties. This is Maya, Daniel's wife. With that pause that made it sound like an unfortunate technicality. I looked down at the tray in my hands. Somewhere in the past hour, I'd stopped being a guest at my own family's party and started actually serving drinks. I hadn't even noticed the transition. That's how far I'd fallen. I couldn't tell the difference between being part of the family and being their servant. Mom, come on. Daniel finally spoke up, but his voice carried all the conviction of a man reading terms and conditions. That's not fair. Oh, please, Daniel, I'm just being honest. Victoria turned to the crowd with theatrical flair. The girl's been wandering around with trays all evening like she's auditioning for Downton Abbey. I was simply acknowledging her dedication to the role. More laughter. Someone actually clapped. I set the tray down on the nearest table with a controlled precision that surprised even me. My hands weren't shaking. My eyes weren't wet. Something inside me had gone perfectly, terrifyingly calm. You know what? I said, my voice cutting through the chatter like a blade through silk. The room went quiet. You're absolutely right, Victoria. Her eyebrows shot up. She hadn't expected agreement. I have been playing a role. I continued reaching for my left hand. The engagement ring, 2 carats, princess cut, purchased from an estate sale because even Daniel's proposal had been secondhand, slid off my finger easier than it should have. And I'm done with the performance. I placed the ring on the silver tray with a soft clink that somehow echoed louder than all their laughter combined. Maya, what are you doing? Daniel's voice cracked slightly. Good. Let him squirm. Leaving. Since I'm just the help, consider this my 2 weeks' notice. Actually, scratch that. Consider this my immediate resignation. I turned toward the door, and that's when Victoria's mask slipped. You ungrateful little... She started, her voice rising to a shriek that would have been embarrassing if she had any capacity for shame. After everything we've done for you, we took you in, gave you a life, a home. I spun back around so fast, my dress flared out like a storm cloud. Took me in?
My laugh was harsh, bitter. Nothing like the soft chuckle I'd perfected over years of pretending their jokes were funny. Lady, I had 2 master's degrees and a career in architectural design before I met your son. I gave that up because you convinced me that family comes first and that being a Whitmore meant sacrifice. Well, guess what? I'm done sacrificing. The room was tomb silent now. Even the string quartet in the corner had stopped playing. You know what? What I've been doing for the past 4 years while you people treated me like decorative furniture? I've been keeping your son's company from imploding. Every deal Daniel closed, I drafted those proposals. Every client he impressed, I coached him through those meetings. Every crisis you people created, I cleaned it up.
That's not, Daniel started, but Amber put a hand on his chest, stopping him. Smart girl, she was learning fast what kind of man she'd won. Your precious Daniel was 3 months away from bankruptcy when I stepped in and restructured his entire business model. I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. Your daughter's wedding to that congressman's son, the one you're bragging about all over town, I planned every detail because Madison was too busy having meltdowns about whether to do orchids or peonies. Your charity foundation that you use to impress your country club friends, I've been running that for 2 years because none of you could be bothered to actually read the financial reports. Victoria's face had gone from pale to red to a concerning shade of purple. And you, I turned to Daniel, feeling 4 years of swallowed words rising up like bile. You stood there and let them treat me like this. You stood there with your mistress's lipstick on your collar and let your mother call me the help in front of everyone we know, and you said nothing. You did nothing. Amber had the decency to look uncomfortable. Daniel just looked trapped. So yeah, Victoria, you're right. I do serve people. I've been serving this family for 4 years, and all I got for it was humiliation and a ring from a dead woman's estate sale. I grabbed my clutch from the table. But here's the thing about servants. Eventually, they stop showing up. And then you realize you never learned how to do anything for yourselves. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the marble with a finality that felt like a countdown. You'll be back, Victoria called after me, her voice dripping with false confidence. You have nowhere to go, no job, no money. I paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. You have something better than money, Victoria. I have self-respect. Try buying that at Bergdorf's. The night air hit me like a baptism as I stepped outside. The valet, a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, stared at me with wide eyes. He'd probably heard everything through the open windows. Ma'am, would you like your car? It's not my car, I said, pulling out my phone. It's theirs. Everything's theirs. I'm calling an Uber. There's a coffee shop about 2 blocks down, he said quietly, sympathetically. They're open late. Better to wait there than here. Smart kid. I tipped him the last cash in my wallet, a crisp 100 that would have gone toward another round of drinks for people who never thanked me, and started walking. The street was quiet, lined with the kind of houses that made architectural magazines drool. I'd walked to this neighborhood 1,000 times, usually after dinners where I'd smiled until my face hurt and laughed at jokes that made my soul wither. Tonight, every step felt like I was walking away from a prison sentence. My phone buzzed. Daniel, then Victoria, then Daniel's sister Madison, then 3 different society friends who'd been at the party, probably looking for gossip they could trade like currency. I blocked them all. The coffee shop was exactly where the valet said it would be, a small, warm place called Grounds for Divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pushed through the door, and a bell chimed overhead. We're about to close, a voice called from behind the counter, then softened when the owner, a woman probably in her 50s with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, got a good look at me. But you look like you need this more than I need to mop the floors early. What can I get you? The strongest thing you have, I said, sinking into a chair by the window. And maybe a miracle. She laughed, a real laugh, not the performative tinkling I'd been hearing all night.
Fresh out of miracles, but I've got a vanilla latte that'll make you believe in second chances. While she worked the espresso machine, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. My hair, which I'd spent 2 hours styling into the perfect updo, was coming loose. My makeup, carefully applied to hide the circles under my eyes from months of stress, was smudged at the corners. My dress, a designer piece I'd bought specifically because Victoria had mentioned it was appropriate for family events, suddenly felt like a costume I couldn't wait to take off. Who had I become? My phone buzzed. Daniel. Then Victoria. Then Daniel's sister Madison. Then 3 different society friends who'd been at the party, probably looking for gossip they could trade like currency. I blocked them all. "Here you go, honey." The woman set a large mug in front of me, along with a chocolate croissant I hadn't ordered. "On the house. And before you argue, I'm Maya too, Maya Rodriguez. And I know that look. That's the look of a woman who just set fire to her old life." I laughed, and to my surprise, it didn't hurt. "How'd you know?" "Because 15 years ago, I walked out of my marriage wearing a gala gown and no shoes, carrying nothing but my pride and a list of everyone who'd ever doubted me. Pulled a chair across from me. Best decision I ever made. Started this place 6 months later with money I made selling jewelry I'd bought with my own damn paychecks. Now I own 3 locations and answer to nobody but myself." 3 locations? I looked around the cozy shop with new appreciation. "That's incredible." "It's freedom," she corrected. "The money's nice, but the freedom, that's priceless. So what's your story? And don't skimp on the details. I've got nowhere to be." So I told her. Everything. The slow erosion of my identity, the way they'd taken my contributions and repackaged them as Daniel's achievements. The mistress who'd been hiding in plain sight. The mother-in-law who'd turned cruelty into an art form. Maya Rodriguez listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic noises. She said, "Let me guess. You've been telling yourself it wasn't that bad, that you were being too sensitive, that they didn't mean it the way it sounded." I stared into my latte. "How did you know?" "Because that's what we do. We make excuses for people who don't deserve them. We shrink ourselves to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold us." She leaned forward. "But you know what? You walked away. That's the hardest part. Everything after this, that's just details." "I don't have anywhere to go," I admitted, the reality of my situation finally hitting me. "All my money's in joint accounts. My credit cards are on his name. I literally walked out with just my phone and my pride." "You got family?" "My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. No siblings. Daniel was supposed to be my family." The words tasted bitter. Maya was quiet for a moment, then stood up with a decisive nod. "You're staying with me tonight. I've got a spare room above the shop. Used to rent it out, but it's empty right now. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." "I can't." "You can, and you will. Consider it women supporting women, or karma balancing out, or whatever makes you feel better about accepting help." She grabbed her keys from behind the counter. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe where you can fall apart properly if you need to." The apartment above grounds for divorce was small but immaculate. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a bathroom with a cloth-foot tub that looked like it had been salvaged from somewhere magical. The walls were painted a soft blue, and there were plants on every available surface. "It's not much," Maya Rodriguez said, handing me a towel and some clothes. "But it's yours for as long as you need it." "Why are you being so nice to me?" I had to ask. "You don't even know me." She smiled sadly. "Because 15 years ago, someone did this for me. A complete stranger took me in when my ex had frozen all my accounts and turned our friends against me. She gave me a place to stay, a job at her bakery, and most importantly, she believed me when I said I could rebuild my life. She passed away 5 years ago, but before she died, she made me promise to pay it forward. So that's what I'm doing." I felt tears building for the first time that night. But these were different. Not tears of humiliation or anger, but something deeper, more cleansing. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow, we start the hard work. Tonight, you cry if you need to, scream if you want to, or sleep if you can. This is your space now. Make it whatever you need it to be." After she left, I stood in the middle of that small room and let myself finally feel everything I'd been holding back. The rage at being dismissed and degraded. The grief over losing 4 years to people who'd never valued me. The fear of starting over with nothing. The shame of not walking away sooner. But underneath all of that, like a current running beneath a frozen river, was something else. Something that felt dangerously close to relief. I pulled off the designer dress and let it pool on the floor like a shed skin. I washed my face until the makeup was gone and I could see my actual features. The ones I'd had before I'd started molding myself into whatever the Whitmores wanted me to be. I climbed into the borrowed pajamas that were too big and smelled of lavender detergent. And then I sat on the edge of the bed and made a list. Not a list of grievances or revenge plans. Those were tempting but useless. Instead, I made a list of everything I'd accomplished before I met Daniel Whitmore. Every skill I'd let atrophy, every dream I postponed, every part of myself I'd filed away because it didn't fit the role of perfect society wife. Maya Cheng, 32 years old, Master's in Architecture from Columbia, graduated summa cum laude, Master's in Business Administration from NYU. 5 years at Morrison & Associates, led design team for 3 award-winning projects. Fluent in Mandarin and Spanish, published 2 papers on sustainable urban design, volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, yoga instructor certification, never used, photography portfolio, gathering dust. That novel I started writing in grad school, 70 pages, sitting in a drawer somewhere. I looked at the list and barely recognized the woman I'd been. She'd been capable, ambitious, creative. She'd had fire. When had I let them put that fire out? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Daniel. "Maya, please come home. Mom didn't mean it. She's just stressed about Madison's wedding. We can talk about this." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "Your mom said exactly what she meant. So did I. Lose this number." I blocked him before he could respond. Then I opened my laptop. Thank God I'd grabbed my work bag on the way out, muscle memory from years of never going anywhere without it, and started making calls. Not to friends, because the Whitmores had successfully isolated me from most of mine over the years. Not to family, because I didn't have any. I called my old mentor from Morrison & Associates, Professor Chen Liu, who'd always told me I had too much talent to waste on playing house with rich people. It was nearly midnight, but he answered on the 3rd ring. "Maya, is everything all right?" "I left him," I said simply. "Daniel, his family, all of it. I need to know if the offer you made me 3 years ago still stands." There was a pause. "You mean the position in Shanghai? The lead architect role for the sustainable housing project?" "That's the one." "Maya, that project's been expanded. It's now a 5-year initiative across 3 cities, backed by both private investment and government support. We're talking about designing the future of urban living in China. It's massive, it's challenging, and honestly, you're overqualified. But I'd kill to have you on the team. When can I start?" Another pause, longer this time. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I just walked out of my marriage with nothing but my degrees and my dignity. I need to rebuild, and I need to do it somewhere far away from here." "Okay." I could hear the smile in his voice. "Give me 3 days to make some calls. The project doesn't officially start for another month, but I can get you on as a consultant immediately. The pay is good, the housing is provided, and Maya, welcome back to the world of the living." After we hung up, I sat there in the silence of that small room and felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Excitement. Pure, uncomplicated excitement about the future. I spent the rest of the night drafting my response to the offer, outlining project ideas, researching sustainable design innovations I'd missed while I'd been busy organizing charity galas and pretending to enjoy yacht clubs. By the time the sun started rising, I had a portfolio ready and a plan forming. The old Maya, the one with 2 master's degrees and a fire in her belly, was waking up, and she was pissed. Maya Rodriguez found me at dawn, still hunched over my laptop, surrounded by notes and sketches. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" she asked, but she was smiling. "I got a job offer," I told her, in Shanghai, leading a sustainable housing project that could change urban design for millions of people. "Holy shit, that's amazing!" She set down 2 mugs of coffee. Apparently, this was going to become our morning ritual. "When do you leave?" "A month, maybe sooner. I need to get my affairs in order, figure out the legal separation, close out the joint accounts." The list felt overwhelming suddenly. "One step at a time," Maya Rodriguez said firmly. "Today, you're going to do 3 things. 1, eat breakfast. 2, call a lawyer. 3, go to that bank and withdraw half of everything in those joint accounts before Daniel's family freezes you out. Trust me, they will try." She was right, of course. The Whitmores were many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. Once they realized I wasn't coming back, they'd move to protect their assets. I needed to move faster. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the office of Catherine Monroe, a divorce attorney who'd been recommended by Maya Rodriguez's network of women who rebuilt their lives after marriages to terrible men. Catherine was in her 40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made you grateful she was on your side. "So, let me get this straight," Catherine said, reviewing the notes she'd taken. "You have 2 master's degrees, gave up a successful career to support your husband's business, spent 4 years essentially acting as his unpaid employee, and now you're walking away with nothing but your dignity? That's about the size of it. And he's been having an affair with his assistant for 6 months. At least 6 months, possibly longer." Catherine smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a shark who'd just spotted blood in the water. "Oh, honey, we're about to make this the most expensive mistake of Daniel Whitmore's life." Over the next hour, she outlined a strategy that made my head spin. New York was an equitable distribution state, which meant marital assets were divided based on what was fair, not just split 50-50. And given that I'd contributed significantly to Daniel's business success, something I could prove with emails, documents, and witness testimony, I was entitled to a substantial portion of everything he'd built during our marriage. What about his family? The Whitmores have money and connections. They'll fight this. Let them fight. We have something better than money and connections. We have documentation and the truth. Catherine pulled out a contract. "First things first, though, we need to secure your immediate finances. I'm going to draft a motion for temporary spousal support while the divorce proceedings play out. Given your current situation and his infidelity, a judge will likely grant it. Then we're going to have a very interesting conversation with the Whitmores about what happens if they try to interfere."
What do you mean? I mean that everything you did for that family, the business deals, the charity work, the event planning, that has a value. Quantifiable, billable value. If we need to, we can calculate exactly how much unpaid labor you contributed and present it as part of your claim. I felt something uncurl in my chest. For 4 years, I'd been told my work didn't matter, that I was just helping out, that being a good wife meant not keeping score. Turned out, keeping score was exactly what I should have been doing all along. By noon, I'd withdrawn half the money from every joint account. Catherine's assistant came with me to the bank to ensure everything was done properly, and opened new accounts in my name only. The sum was more than I'd expected, $300,000. Apparently, Daniel had been better at saving than I had realized, probably because I'd been the one managing the household expenses and keeping costs down. "This should hold you over until the divorce is finalized," Catherine had said. "Don't spend it frivolously, but don't feel guilty about using it either.
You earned this money as much as he did. The hardest part was going back to the Whitmore mansion one last time to collect my personal belongings. Catherine had advised me to do it quickly, with a witness, and during a time when the family was likely to be out. I chose Tuesday afternoon when Victoria had her weekly spa appointment and Daniel would be at the office, or at least pretending to be at the office while he was probably having a meltdown about his crumbling life. Maya Rodriguez came with me, along with 2 movers Catherine had arranged. We pulled up to the house in a rental truck, and I felt my stomach clench at the sight of it. This place had been my home for 4 years, but now it looked like a mausoleum. Beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, no relation, though we'd joked about it, answered the door. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Miss Maya, Mr. Daniel said you weren't coming back." "I'm just here for my things, Miss Chen. Is anyone home?" "No, ma'am, all out. But Miss Maya," she lowered her voice, glancing back into the house nervously, "they've been saying terrible things about you. Mrs. Whitmore Sr. has been calling everyone, telling them you had a breakdown, that you were unstable." "Of course she has." I felt anger flash through me, but I kept my voice steady. "Mrs. Chen, you've worked here for 15 years. You've seen everything. If I needed you to testify about what really goes on in this house, would you?" She hesitated, then nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. That family treated you poorly. I saw it all. The way they talked to you, talked about you when you weren't around. You were the only one who ever treated me like a person instead of furniture." "Thank you. That means more than you know." I moved through the house like a ghost, collecting pieces of my former life. My clothes, my books, my laptop and files. The few photos I had of my parents, the jewelry I'd bought with my own money before the marriage. I left the pieces Daniel had given me on the dresser because I didn't want anything that came with strings attached. In Daniel's office, I found something that made me stop cold. A stack of papers on his desk marked Whitmore Industries Restructuring Plan. I picked it up, started reading, and felt ice water run through my veins. It was my plan, the entire business restructuring that had saved Daniel's company from bankruptcy, every strategy, every projection, every detail I'd spent months developing was there, word for word. Except my name was nowhere on it. Instead, it was presented as developed by Daniel Whitmore with consultation from external advisors. External advisors. That's what I'd been reduced to. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. Catherine was going to love this. "Maya, we should go," Maya Rodriguez called from downstairs. "The movers are done loading and I don't want to push our luck." I took one last look around Daniel's office. There was a photo on his desk. Our wedding day. Both of us smiling, young and stupid and full of hope. I picked it up, looked at the girl I'd been, and felt nothing but pity for her. She'd had no idea what she was walking into. I left the photo face down on the desk and walked out. As we pulled away from the Whitmore estate, I didn't look back. There was nothing there worth seeing anymore. That night, back in the apartment above grounds for divorce, I got the first message from Madison, Daniel's sister. Unlike the others, hers wasn't angry or demanding. It was worried. "Maya, please call me. I know what happened at the gala was awful, but you just disappeared. Daniel's a mess, Mom's freaking out, and honestly, I think they're starting to realize how much you actually did around here. The charity foundation is already falling apart. Turns out nobody else actually knows how to run it. Can we talk?" I almost deleted it. Almost. But something made me respond. "Madison, I spent 4 years making sure your family looked good, ran smoothly, and succeeded in everything they touched. I did it because I thought that's what family did for each other. But your family never treated me like family. They treated me like an employee they didn't have to pay. So no, we can't talk, but I want you to understand something. Every crisis that family faces from now on, every failure, every embarrassment, every moment when you realize something's not working and you can't figure out why, that's the cost of taking someone for granted. That's what happens when you break your backbone and expect to keep standing tall. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Her response came immediately. "You're right. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I never agreed with how they treated you, but I was too much of a coward to speak up." "Then stop being a coward," I typed back. "Stand up to your mother. Build your own life instead of living in her shadow. And Madison, don't make the mistake I made. Don't sacrifice who you are for people who will never appreciate it." This time, she didn't respond, but I'd said what needed to be said. The next 3 weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and preparation. Catherine worked like a machine, filing motions, gathering evidence, building a case so airtight that Daniel's fancy corporate attorneys looked nervous every time we showed up to a meeting. The temporary spousal support was granted, $5,000 a month until the divorce was finalized, which would take at least a year given the complexity of untangling our finances. "He's going to fight the business valuation," Catherine warned me. "He's claiming you had nothing to do with the company's success." "Then we'll let the documents speak for themselves." I handed her a flash drive. Every email I sent on behalf of Whitmore Industries, every proposal I drafted,
Every client relationship I managed, it's all there, time-stamped and backed up. Catherine looked at the drive like it was made of gold. "Maya, this is everything. With this, we can prove that you were essentially a partner in the business, even if you weren't on the official paperwork. This changes everything." "Good. Let it change. I'm done being erased." Professor Chen Lu came through faster than expected. 2 weeks after our phone call, I had a contract offer from the Shanghai Sustainable Housing Initiative, a 3-year position as lead design architect with an option to extend to 5 years. The salary was competitive, the benefits were excellent, and most importantly, it was mine. Something I'd earned based on my qualifications, not my relationship to someone else. I signed the contract the same day Daniel's lawyers filed a motion claiming I was unfit to receive spousal support due to mental instability. Apparently, Victoria's smear campaign had made it into official legal documents. Catherine tore the motion apart in her response, citing medical records. I had none because I wasn't unstable. Witness testimony. Mrs. Chen gave a statement that made Victoria sound like the villain in a Victorian novel, and pointing out that claiming a woman is mentally unstable for leaving an unhappy marriage is not only archaic, it's offensive to the court's intelligence. The judge agreed. Daniel's motion was denied, and he was ordered to pay my legal fees for filing it. "That's going to cost him about 15 grand, she said with satisfaction. Maybe next time he'll think twice before letting his mother dictate his legal strategy." 3 days before I was scheduled to leave for Shanghai, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Maya." Victoria's voice was different. Not the sharp, cruel tone I was used to, but something almost desperate. "We really don't. Please, just hear me out. There are things you don't understand, things about the family. I understand plenty, Victoria. I understand that you're a bully who gets off on making other people feel small. I understand that you raised a son who's too weak to stand up to you. And I understand that you're calling me now because something's going wrong and you think I'm going to fix it. Am I close?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Madison's wedding is falling apart. The venue double booked, the caterer went out of business, and she's having panic attacks daily. You were the only one who could handle her. We need—" No. The word came out hard, final. "You need to learn how to handle your own family drama. Madison has my number if she wants to talk, but I'm not your fixer anymore, Victoria. I'm not your anything." "You vindictive little bitch." And there it was, the real Victoria, bursting through the facade of civility like a monster through paper. "See? This is why we can't work together anymore. You can't even pretend to be civil for 5 minutes. Good luck with the wedding, Victoria. I hear disaster planning is a valuable skill. Maybe you'll learn something."
I hung up and blocked the number. Maya Rodriguez was waiting downstairs with 2 glasses of wine. How'd it go? She called me a vindictive little bitch. Ah, so she's finally being honest. That's progress. She handed me a glass. You know what's funny? They're panicking because they're finally seeing what you were worth. The charity foundation is underwater. Daniel's losing clients left and right because you were the one who actually maintained those relationships. And from what I hear through the grapevine, Madison's wedding is turning into a complete disaster, all in 3 weeks. Imagine what the next year is going to look like. That's not my problem anymore, I said, and meant it. Nope, it's not. Your problem now is deciding what to do with your new life. Speaking of which, she pulled an envelope from her pocket. Thought you might need this. Inside was a check for $5,000.
Maya, I can't. It's not charity. It's payment. I looked through your portfolio. The one you showed me that first night, all those architectural projects you'd worked on. I want you to design the expansion for my coffee shop. I'm opening a 4th location, and I want it to be special. Something that makes people stop and say, whoa. Can you do that? I looked at the check, then at her kind face, and felt tears prick my eyes for the 2nd time since leaving the Whitmores. But these were good tears. Yeah, I said, I can do that. Then consider this a down payment. Send me the designs when you're settled in Shanghai. No rush. I know you've got a whole new life to build. But Maya, the architect Maya, the one with the degrees and the talent and the fire, she's been waiting for you to remember her. I'm glad you finally did. We clinked glasses, and I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in what I'd done for others, but in what I was about to do for myself. The night before my flight, I did something impulsive. I drove back to the neighborhood where the Whitmore estate sat, parked across the street, and watched. Not because I missed it, God no, but because I needed to see it one more time to know for certain that I was making the right choice. Through the lit windows, I could see them moving around like actors in a play I was no longer part of. Daniel, pacing his office with a phone to his ear, looking stressed. Victoria gesturing dramatically at someone I couldn't see. Madison sitting at the dining room table with her head in her hands. They were falling apart without me. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, no vindication. Just a distant, objective observation. They'd built their lives on a foundation of my unpaid labor. And now that foundation was gone, everything was crumbling. That wasn't my fault. That was theirs. I started the car and drove away, and this time I knew I'd never come back. Not even to drive by. They were my past, and my past was dead. At the airport the next morning, Maya Rodriguez came to see me off. She'd closed the coffee shop for an hour, claiming it was for a special occasion. You didn't have to do this, I said, hugging her tight. Yes, I did. Someone saw me off when I started over, remember? Besides, I needed to make sure you actually got on that plane. No last-minute cold feet allowed. No cold feet, just excitement. And it was true. For the first time in years, I was walking towards something instead of running away from something. The distinction mattered. Text me when you land. Send me pictures of Shanghai. And Maya, she held both of my hands, her eyes serious. Don't look back. Not at him, not at them, not at any of it. The only direction that matters now is forward. Forward, I repeated, committing it to memory like a mantra. The flight attendant called my boarding group. I grabbed my carry-on, packed light because I was starting fresh, buying new things, creating a new life from scratch, and headed toward the gate. Just before I disappeared into the jetway, I turned back one more time. Maya Rodriguez was still standing there watching me go, and she raised her coffee cup in a silent toast to new beginnings, to second chances, to women who walk away and never look back. I boarded the plane and found my seat by the window. As we taxied down the runway, I pulled out my phone for one last look at American news, American drama, American problems that were no longer mine.
And there it was, trending on social media, #Whitmore wedding disaster. Apparently Madison's wedding, the one that was supposed to cement the family's social standing, had imploded spectacularly. The venue had fallen through, the replacement venue had double-booked them with a rival family's event, and in the chaos, someone had leaked to the press that the groom had been having second thoughts for months. The Whitmore family name, which Victoria had protected like a sacred relic, was now tabloid fodder. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of their drama, their dysfunction, their endless need for validation from people who didn't matter. I put my phone on airplane mode and opened my laptop instead. Professor Chen Liu had sent me preliminary files for the Shanghai project, blueprints, site surveys, environmental impact reports. Real work. Meaningful work. The kind of work that would change lives instead of just maintaining appearances. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at New York City disappearing beneath clouds and felt the last threads connecting me to the Whitmores snap cleanly. They were down there, drowning in consequences of their own making. I was up here, flying toward a future I was building with my own hands. The girl who'd walked out of that gala with nothing but her dignity was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who'd learned that walking away was sometimes the bravest thing you could do, and who understood that the best revenge wasn't hurting the people who hurt you. It was becoming so successful, they couldn't afford to forget you. The Whitmores thought they had seen the last of her. They had no idea that her story was just beginning, and their nightmare was about to become front-page news.
6 months into my Shanghai life, I wasn't just rebuilding. I was becoming someone they'd never recognize. And back in New York, while I was rising like a phoenix made of steel and ambition, they were discovering what it felt like when your entire foundation walks out the door and never looks back. Shanghai swallowed me whole and spit me out transformed. The morning after I landed, jet-lagged and disoriented, Professor Chen Liu picked me up from my hotel with 2 cups of the strongest coffee I'd ever tasted, and a grin that suggested he knew exactly how overwhelmed I was feeling. "First day jitters?" he asked, navigating traffic with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from decades of survival in Chinese cities. "More like first day terror," I admitted, watching the city blur past my window, a dizzying mix of ancient temples and futuristic skyscrapers, street vendors and luxury boutiques, chaos and order existing in perfect harmony. What if I've forgotten how to do this? What if 4 years away from real architecture turned my brain to mush? "Then you'll remember. And Maya," he glanced at me seriously, "you didn't take 4 years away from architecture. You spent 4 years solving impossible logistical problems, managing complex personalities, and keeping an entire operation running smoothly. That's exactly the skill set we need for this project. The technical stuff? That's the easy part. You never lost that. You just forgot you had it." The project headquarters was everything I'd hoped for and nothing I expected. Housed in a converted warehouse in Yangpu District, it was a designer's wet dream. Exposed brick walls, covered in sketchings and blueprints, 3D printers humming in corners, scale models scattered across every surface, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. This wasn't some corporate office where creativity went to die. This was where innovation lived and breathed. Chen Liu walked me through the space, introducing me to faces I'd only seen on video calls. Li Wei, the structural engineer who could calculate load-bearing weights faster than most people could multiply, gave me a firm handshake and said, "I read your papers on sustainable design in graduate school. It's an honor to work with you." Priya, an environmental scientist from Mumbai, with more degrees than wall space to hang them, pulled me into an unexpected hug and whispered, "Thank God you're here. These boys need someone to remind them that sustainability isn't just a buzzword." Marco, an Italian architect who'd been designing housing for developing nations since before I was born, looked me up and down and said simply, "You have the eyes of someone who's been through hell and came out sharper. Good. This project will eat you alive if you're not tough enough." "My office is where?" I asked Chen Lu, still processing the fact that these people, actual legends in sustainable architecture, were treating me like an equal instead of Daniel Whitmore's wife. Top floor, best view in the building. I figured if we're going to work you to death, you should at least have something beautiful to look at while it happens. He led me up a spiral staircase to a space that made my breath catch. Windows on 2 walls overlooked the Huangpu River, where ancient fishing boats shared water with modern yachts. The desk was made from reclaimed wood that still showed its history in every scar and grain. Empty bookshelves waited to be filled with my vision. And on the desk sat a welcome basket with a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. "We've been waiting for you. Let's build something that matters." I set down my bag and just stood there, letting it sink in. This was mine. Not borrowed, not conditional, not dependent on whether I made someone else look good. Mine. "Take the day to settle in," Chen Lu said. "Tomorrow, we throw you into the deep end." That night, alone in my hotel room, I hadn't found an apartment yet, I video called Catherine Monroe, my lawyer back in New York. She answered on the second ring, looking tired but victorious. "Perfect timing. I was just about to email you. How's Shanghai?" Terrifying and perfect. "What's happening with the divorce?" Catherine's smile turned shark-like. "Daniel's lawyers are panicking. That flash drive you gave me with all the emails and documents, we just submitted it as evidence that you were a de facto business partner. His attorneys are arguing that you were just a supportive spouse, but Maya, the emails speak for themselves. You weren't supporting his business, you were running it." Something warm and vindicating bloomed in my chest. "What does that mean for the settlement?" "It means you're entitled to at least 40% of Whitmore Industries' value during your marriage. Based on the company's current valuation, we're talking somewhere between $2 and $3 million, plus spousal support, plus the division of other marital assets. Daniel is losing his mind." I let that number sink in. $2 to $3 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Money that represented 4 years of my unpaid labor, my stolen credit, my erased contributions. How long until this is finalized? Realistically, 8 to 12 months if Daniel keeps dragging his feet. But Maya, here's the thing. He's starting to crack. His business is hemorrhaging clients. The charity foundation you used to run folded last month because nobody else knew how to manage it. And get this, Madison's wedding was such a disaster that it made page 6. The family's social reputation is in tatters. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing but a distant, clinical observation. They were learning what it cost to take someone for granted. Keep me updated, but Catherine, I don't want to drag this out for revenge. I just want what's fair, and then I want to move on completely.
That's exactly what we're going to do. After we hung up, I pulled out my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I searched Whitmore Family, New York, just to see what the damage looked like from across the world. The results were worse than I'd imagined. Articles about Madison's wedding disaster, think pieces about the fall of society dynasties, business reports about Whitmore Industries losing major contracts. There was even a brutal profile in New York Magazine titled "The Woman Behind the Whitmore Empire" and what happened when she left. Someone had done their homework, interviewing former clients, business associates, even Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. The article painted a clear picture. Maya Chen had been the competent one, the detail-oriented one, the one who actually got things done. And now that she was gone, the house of cards was collapsing. I closed the laptop. That was their story now, not mine. My first month in Shanghai was baptism by fire. Chen Liu hadn't been kidding about the deep end. We were designing affordable housing that had to be beautiful, sustainable, scalable, and achievable within budget constraints that would make most architects weep. Every day was a battle between what was ideal and what was possible, between vision and reality, between innovation and practicality. But I loved it. God, I loved it. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be challenged intellectually, to have someone critique my designs not because they wanted to diminish me, but because they wanted to make the work better. To stay up until 3 a.m. arguing with Priya about water recycling systems, not because we were fighting, but because we both cared deeply about getting it right. "You're different here," Li Wei observed one night when we were the last ones in the office, both hunched over a structural model that refused to cooperate with the laws of physics. "More alive." "I was dead for 4 years and didn't realize it. This is what resuscitation feels like." He laughed. "Well, the dead don't usually design buildings this innovative. We're going to win awards for this, you know. Not just in China, internationally. This project is going to put your name on the map. My name. Not Daniel's name. Not the Whitmore name. Mine." I found an apartment in the French concession after 2 weeks of searching, a tiny one-bedroom in a building that probably had been there since the 1920s. The landlord, a grandmother who spoke no English and tolerated my terrible Mandarin with patient amusement, showed me the space with pride. It had original hardwood floors, a balcony overlooking a street lined with plane trees, and windows that let in the kind of light that make photographers weep with joy. "How much?" I asked in halting Mandarin.
She quoted a price that worked out to about $800 a month. In New York, this apartment would have cost 4 times that. I signed the lease that day. Furnishing it became a treasure hunt. I bought a bed from a secondhand market, a table from a street vendor who carved furniture from reclaimed wood, chairs from a boutique in Tianzifang that sold vintage pieces restored to glory. Every item had a story, and none of them were connected to the Whitmores. This was mine. Every mismatched piece, every imperfect choice, every decision made purely because I wanted it. I hung my own art on the walls. Photographs I'd taken during my weekend explorations of the city, prints from local artists I'd discovered in galleries tucked down alleyways. I filled the bookshelves with architecture books in Chinese and English, novels I'd always wanted to read but never had time for, journals where I sketched ideas that had nothing to do with work. The balcony became my sanctuary. Every morning, I'd sit there with coffee and watch the neighborhood wake up. Old men doing Tai Chi in the park across the street vendors setting up breakfast stalls, students hurrying toward the nearby university. It was such a contrast to the Whitmore mansion where mornings had been silent and sterile, where I'd walked through rooms that looked like magazine spreads but felt like mausoleums. I started running again, something I'd given up during the marriage because Victoria had made snide comments about looking athletic in a way that suggested it wasn't a compliment. I joined a women's running group that met at sunrise along the Bund and found myself laughing as we jogged past tourists and early morning fishermen, our feet pounding in rhythm while we practiced our terrible puns in both Mandarin and English. "Why did you move to Shanghai?" one of them asked me during a post-run breakfast. Her name was Jenny, a transplant from Beijing who worked in tech and had the kind of dry humor that made everything funnier. "Fresh start," I said, which was both true and incomplete. Got divorced, took a job, figured putting an ocean between me and my old life was the only way to really move forward. "Amen to that," said Alicia, an American expat who'd been in Shanghai for 5 years. "I did the same thing, except I didn't have a fancy architecture job. I just taught English until I figured out what I actually wanted to do. Best decision I ever made. Sometimes you need to burn your old life down to build something better." They didn't know about the Whitmores, didn't care about New York society drama, didn't treat me like I was defined by my marriage or my divorce. They just knew me as Maya, the slightly awkward architect who couldn't master chopsticks, but could discuss sustainable urban planning for hours. 3 months in, we presented our preliminary designs to the board. I'd been dreading it. These presentations had always been Daniel's thing, back when I'd do all the work and he'd take all the credit. But Chen Liu pulled me aside beforehand. "You've got this. You know this project better than anyone. You've lived and breathed these designs for months. Just show them what you see." The presentation room was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling screens, a table that seated 30, simultaneous translation happening in real time. The board members were a mix of government officials, private investors, and urban planning experts.
Minister Wang, the woman who'd first approved our project, sat at the head of the table with an expression that gave away nothing. I stood at the front with my team, pulled up our renderings, and began.
Traditional affordable housing fails because it warehouses people instead of building communities. We're proposing something radical, housing that's not just sustainable, but regenerative. Buildings that produce more energy than they consume, water systems that purify and recycle, rooftop gardens that residents maintain and harvest, creating both food security and community bonds. These aren't just apartments. They're ecosystems designed around human flourishing. I walked them through every detail. The passive solar design that would reduce heating and cooling costs by 70%. The modular construction that would make the buildings affordable to replicate across multiple cities. The community spaces designed to encourage social interaction while respecting cultural needs for privacy. The educational programs built into the design, teaching residents about sustainable living through the very infrastructure of their homes. The questions came fast and brutal. How much per unit? How long to construct? What about maintenance costs? Could this scale to other climates? Every question, I had an answer backed by research, data, and working prototypes. This wasn't hope and dreams. This was rigorous, tested, achievable vision. When I finished, there was silence. Then Minister Wang stood up. Ms. Chen, in 20 years of urban development work, this is the most comprehensive sustainable housing proposal I've seen. The board will need to review the numbers, but speaking personally, this is exactly what China needs. When can you break ground? I looked at Chen Liu, who was grinning like he just won the lottery. 3 months if funding is approved? Consider it approved. We'll expedite the paperwork. After they filed out, my team erupted. Li Wei picked me up and spun me around. Pri was crying happy tears. Marco opened champagne someone had optimistically stored in the office fridge. Chan Liu pulled me aside, his eyes bright with pride. That was extraordinary. You commanded that room like you were born to do this. Whatever happened in your past, whatever made you doubt yourself, you just proved none of it mattered. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. That night, alone in my apartment, I let myself cry. Not sad tears, cleansing tears. Tears for the woman I'd been, who'd believed she needed to shrink herself to deserve love. Tears for the 4 years I'd lost to people who'd never valued me. But also tears of relief, of recognition, of coming home to myself. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I recognized the New York area code. Maya, this is Madison. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to tell you something. The family is falling apart. Daniel's business is failing. Mom's having some kind of breakdown because her reputation is ruined. And I finally stood up to her, told her everything she did to you was wrong. We're not speaking now. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. I hope you're doing okay wherever you are. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to savor their suffering. But mostly, I just felt tired of them. They'd taken up so much space in my head for so long, and I was done giving them rent-free real estate in my thoughts. I typed back, Madison, I'm glad you found your voice. That took courage. I'm doing more than okay. I'm thriving. I hope you find your own path, separate from your mother's expectations. That's the only way to actually live. Take care of yourself. She responded immediately. Thank you. And Maya, for what it's worth, Daniel knows he fucked up. He asks about you constantly, wants to know where you are, what you're doing. I think losing you destroyed him more than losing the business. I blocked the number. I didn't need updates on Daniel's regrets. His consequences were his own to manage. But the text sat with me as I fell asleep that night. Part of me, a small, petty part, was glad he was suffering. But the larger part, the part that had grown in Shanghai, just felt sorry for him. He'd had something real and treated it for something easy. He'd chosen his mother's approval over his wife's partnership. He'd mistaken convenience for love and control for respect. That wasn't my problem anymore. The next 6 months blurred together in the best possible way. We broke ground on the pilot project in September, a 3-building complex that would house 200 families. I spent my days on construction sites, arguing with contractors about sustainable materials, problem-solving when reality didn't match our designs, teaching local workers about green construction techniques they'd never encountered. My Mandarin improved out of necessity. My confidence grew with every challenge we solved. My body got stronger from climbing scaffolding and walking miles around construction sites. I cut my hair short because it was practical, not because anyone told me how I should look. I bought clothes that made me feel powerful instead of appropriate. I stopped wearing makeup most days because I didn't need armor anymore. I became, slowly and deliberately, unapologetically myself. The architecture community started noticing. An article in Architectural Digest about innovative, sustainable housing projects featured our work prominently. I gave a TEDx talk in Shanghai about designing for human dignity, not just human shelter. Universities started inviting me to speak. Design firms reached out about consulting opportunities. Other cities in China expressed interest in replicating our model. My name, Maya Chen, not Maya Whitmore, not Daniel's wife, just Maya Chen, started appearing in industry publications. People who mattered in architecture started following my work. I received an invitation to present at the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi, another invitation to join an advisory board for UN Habitat. I was becoming someone the old Maya would have admired, someone the Whitmores had actively prevented me from becoming. "You're going to be famous," Priya told me one night when we were working late, reviewing environmental impact data that would make our project even stronger. "You're going to be actually famous in our field. The next generation of architects is going to study your work." "I don't want to be famous," I said honestly. "I just want to build things that matter." Those aren't mutually exclusive. And Maya, you deserve the recognition. You spent years letting someone else take credit for your work. It's time you got your flowers while you can still smell them. Back in New York, according to Catherine's updates, the Whitmores were experiencing what happens when your foundation crumbles. Daniel's company had lost 3 major clients and was being kept afloat only by emergency loans from Victoria's trust fund. The charity foundation I'd run had officially dissolved, with local news outlets noting that it had fallen apart within months of my departure. Victoria's social standing had taken hit after hit. Canceled invitations, dropped board positions, whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. "Daniel's trying to reach out to your old contacts," Catherine told me during one of our monthly video calls, "trying to rebuild the relationships you maintained. But Maya, here's the thing. Those people are loyal to you, not him. I've had 3 different clients mention that they'd rather work with you directly than deal with Whitmore Industries." "What did you tell them?"
That you're currently based in Shanghai doing revolutionary work in sustainable housing, but that you might be open to consulting opportunities in the future. Was that okay? I thought about it. "Yeah, actually, that's perfect. Send them my contact info. If they want to work with me, not as some extension of Daniel, I'm open to it." Already done. You've got 2 emails waiting in your inbox. After we hung up, I checked my email. Sure enough, 2 messages from former Whitmore Industries clients. Both mentioned that they'd always known I was the talent behind Daniel's success. Both offered consulting fees that made my eyes water. Both explicitly stated they had no interest in working with Daniel, but would love to work with me. I forwarded them to Chen Liu with a note. "Is this something I should consider? Don't want it to interfere with our project." His response came within minutes. "Absolutely consider it. This is exactly the kind of consulting that enhances your reputation and brings international attention to our work. Plus, you'd be crazy to turn down those fees. Do it." So I did.
I took on 2 consulting projects for American companies looking to incorporate sustainable design into their development plans. The work was challenging, the pay was extraordinary, and the validation of being sought out for my expertise, not my connections, not my marriage, just my skills, was intoxicating. The money started adding up. Between my Shanghai salary, the consulting fees, and the settlement money Catherine was fighting to secure, I was building actual wealth. My own wealth, money I'd earned through my own talent and hard work. I started investing some of it back into projects that mattered. Scholarships for women studying architecture, grants for sustainable housing initiatives in developing countries, and donations to organizations that supported survivors of financial abuse. Money I'd once thought belonged to the Whitmores was now funding causes they'd never have approved of. That felt like justice. 1 year after I'd walked out of the Whitmore estate, I was standing on the roof of our first completed building in Shanghai, watching the sunset over a city that had become home. The building behind me was alive with families moving into their new apartments, affordable, beautiful, sustainable housing that would improve their quality of life while teaching their children about environmental stewardship. My phone rang. Catherine. "You sitting down?" she asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm standing on a roof in Shanghai, but I can sit." Daniel's lawyers just agreed to our settlement terms, $2.8 million, plus you keep everything you withdrew from the joint accounts, plus he pays all the legal fees. Maya, you won completely. I looked out at the Shanghai skyline, at the city where I'd rebuilt myself from scratch, and felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph exactly, more like closure. The Whitmores had taken 4 years of my life, but they hadn't broken me. They'd just freed me.
When's the final court date? 3 weeks. You don't have to be there. We can handle everything remotely. Unless you want to fly back. I thought about it. About walking back into New York, into that courtroom, facing Daniel one last time. Part of me wanted to do it. Wanted him to see what I'd become without him. But the stronger part, the part that had grown in Shanghai, didn't need that validation. Handle it remotely. I've got buildings to design and a life to live. Daniel doesn't get any more of my time. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. One more thing. He sent a message through his lawyers. Wants to know if you'd be willing to talk. Says he needs closure. I laughed, actually laughed. Tell him I gave him 4 years of chances to talk to me like I mattered. He doesn't get to demand closure now that it's convenient for him. The divorce papers are his closure. After we hung up, I sat on that roof for a long time, watching Shanghai transform from day to night. Somewhere in New York, Daniel was probably panicking, Victoria was probably scheming, and Madison was probably trying to hold together a family that had rotted from the inside. I didn't care. I had this, a city that had adopted me, work that mattered, friends who valued me, a future I was building with my own hands. The Whitmores had taught me an invaluable lesson. When people show you they don't value you, believe them, and then leave, build something extraordinary, and never look back. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Jenny, my running group friend. "Drinks tomorrow night? We're celebrating Alicia's promotion and your general badassery. No is not an option." I smiled and typed back, "I'm in, but what badassery? Girl, you moved to a foreign country alone, started over with nothing, became an award-winning architect, and designed buildings that are going to change lives. If that's not badass, I don't know what is. Also, I saw your TEDx talk and cried. Bring tissues tomorrow because we're going to make you listen to how proud we all are of you." I put my phone away and just breathed. A year ago, I'd been standing in a mansion that wasn't mine, surrounded by people who didn't value me, convinced that leaving would mean losing everything. I'd been so wrong. Leaving had meant finding everything. Finding myself, finding work that mattered, finding people who valued me for who I actually was. The Whitmores had taught me 4 years of misery, but in return, I'd gotten my freedom. That was the best trade I'd ever made. As I headed down from the roof, I passed families unpacking in their new apartments. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, ran up to me with excitement, bubbling out of her like carbonation. "Are you the architect?" she asked in Mandarin. "I am," I said, kneeling down to her level. "Thank you for making our home beautiful. Mama says beautiful things make beautiful thoughts." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was why the work mattered. Not for recognition or revenge or proving anything to anyone, but for this little girl who would grow up in a home that taught her that beauty and sustainability could coexist, that good design wasn't reserved for the wealthy, that her environment mattered. "Your mama is very smart," I told her. "Take care of this place. It's special."
I will. I'm going to be an architect too when I grow up. I watched her run back to her family and felt something click fully into place. The Whitmores had made me feel small, worthless, forgettable, but here I was, inspiring little girls to dream bigger than the spaces they'd been given. The best revenge wasn't their downfall. It was this: becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so genuinely happy that they became irrelevant to my story. They were a chapter I'd closed, and I'd moved on to writing something better. My phone buzzed one more time. This time, it was an email from Architectural Review magazine. "We'd like to feature you in our 40 Under 40 issue, Architects Reshaping the Future of Sustainable Design. Are you available for an interview?" I smiled and started typing my response. Yes, I was available. Yes, I'd love to be featured. Yes, I was ready for the world to know my name. Not as Daniel Whitmore's wife, not as Victoria Whitmore's daughter-in-law, not as the woman who'd left, just as Maya Chen, the architect who'd rebuilt herself along with everything else. Success is the loudest revenge, but indifference is the sharpest blade. While Maya Chen was becoming an award-winning architect who was changing the landscape of sustainable housing, the Whitmores were discovering what it meant to be utterly replaceable. Daniel's company was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Victoria's social empire had crumbled without the woman she'd called the help. And Madison, she was finally learning to stand on her own, even if it meant standing alone. But Maya wasn't watching anymore. She'd stopped checking their social media, stopped caring about their disasters, stopped defining her success by their failures. She'd found something they never had: genuine purpose, real community, and work that mattered. The Whitmores had broken their backbone and wondered why they couldn't stand. But Maya had rebuilt herself stronger, taller, and completely beyond their reach. And now, just when she'd finally moved on completely, they were about to do something desperate. Something that would force one final confrontation. Because losing someone is one thing, but watching them thrive without you, that's unbearable. They say the truest test of character isn't how you treat people when you need them, it's how you react when they no longer need you. I learned that lesson standing in a convention center in Singapore 18 months after walking away from the Whitmores, when Daniel appeared out of nowhere, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in half that time. He'd flown halfway around the world to find me, and I realized something profound. His downfall wasn't my victory. My indifference was. The World Sustainable Architecture Summit in Singapore was supposed to be my crowning moment. I was receiving the Emerging Leader Award for our Shanghai housing project, which had become an international case study in how to build communities instead of just structures. The project had exceeded every expectation: 98% occupancy,
energy costs reduced by 73%, resident satisfaction scores that made other housing developments look like prisons. We weren't just building apartments anymore, we were designing blueprints for urban futures. I stood backstage in a dress I'd bought in a Shanghai boutique, deep emerald green that made me feel powerful without trying. My short hair styled in a way that Victoria would have called too severe, but made me feel like exactly who I'd become. Li Wei, Priya, and Marco were with me, all of us nominees in different categories. We'd flown in together, laughing through airport security, taking selfies on the plane like kids on a field trip. "You nervous?" Priya asked, adjusting my collar with the kind of casual intimacy that comes from spending 18 months building something meaningful together. "Terrified," I admitted. What if I trip walking to the stage? What if my speech sounds stupid? What if you just accept that you earned this and enjoy the damn moment? Marco interrupted, his Italian accent making everything sound both wise and slightly irreverent. "You changed lives, Maya. You proved that affordable housing doesn't have to be ugly or unsustainable. You're about to get an award you actually deserve, not one your husband bought for you at a charity auction. This is real." The ceremony was held in a ballroom that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a year, filled with the who's who of international architecture. I recognized names from textbooks, faces from magazine covers, legends who'd been reshaping skylines since before I was born. And I was one of them now. Not somebody's wife, not somebody's assistant, just Maya Chen, architect. When they called my name, the applause felt like absolution. I walked to that stage with my head high, accepted the glass trophy that was heavier than it looked, and stepped up to the microphone. 18 months ago, I was standing in a mansion that wasn't mine, living a life that wasn't mine, believing that my value came from making other people successful. I walked away from that life with nothing but my degrees and my dignity. Today, I stand here with a building in Shanghai that houses 200 families, with a project that's being replicated in 5 other Chinese cities, and with a team that reminds me daily why this work matters. If there's one thing I want people to take from this, it's this. Your worth isn't determined by who needs you. It's determined by what you build when nobody's watching. Thank you.
The applause was thunderous. People stood. I saw Chen Lu in the 3rd row openly crying with pride. I saw my team on their feet, cheering like I'd just won the Olympics instead of an architecture award. I saw my future stretched out before me, bright and limitless and entirely mine. What I didn't see, until it was too late to avoid it, was Daniel Whitmore, standing near the exit, looking like a ghost who'd forgotten how to haunt properly. The after-party was held in a garden on the convention center's rooftop, strings of lights creating constellations overhead, while waiters circulated with champagne and canapes that were probably individually plated by people with culinary degrees. I was surrounded by well-wishers, people wanting to talk about the Shanghai project, journalists asking for interviews, other architects discussing potential collaborations. Maya Chen, a woman from the UN Habitat Program, approached with a business card. "We're launching a sustainable housing initiative in East Africa and would love to discuss your involvement. Your approach to community-centered design is exactly what we need." I took her card, my mind already racing with possibilities. "I'd be honored to discuss it. Can we schedule a call next week?" "Actually, we're hosting a working dinner tomorrow night. Would you be available? We have funding secured and are moving quickly." "Absolutely. Send me the details." This was my life now. Opportunities arriving faster than I could process them. My name opening doors that used to be locked. My work speaking louder than any last name ever could. "Maya." The voice hit me like ice water. I turned slowly, already knowing who I'd see. Daniel looked terrible. His suit was expensive but hung on him wrong, like he'd lost weight and hadn't bothered to get it tailored.
His hair had more gray than I remembered, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 18 months ago. He looked like a man who'd been living on stress and regret, marinated in consequences. "What are you doing here?" I kept my voice neutral, aware that people around us were starting to notice. "I needed to see you, to talk to you. Maya, please, just 5 minutes." "How did you even know I'd be here?" "Your award was announced online 2 weeks ago. I've been following your work. I've seen everything, the articles, the TEDx talk, the projects. Maya, what you're doing is incredible." "What I'm doing is none of your business anymore." I turned to walk away, but he grabbed my arm gently. Not forceful, just desperate. "Please. I flew 20 hours to get here. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. The man who'd stood by while his mother humiliated me, who cheated on me with his assistant, who let me shoulder his business while taking all the credit. He looked broken. Honestly, broken. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. 5 minutes. Not here. There's a balcony down the hall. The balcony overlooked Singapore's skyline, a futuristic cityscape that made even Shanghai look modest. We stood at opposite ends, the space between us feeling like an ocean. "You look amazing. Different. Stronger." "I am different. I'm not the woman you married. That woman died the night your mother called her the help, and you said nothing." He flinched. "I know. Maya, I've replayed that night 1,000 times. I should have defended you. You should have done a lot of things, Daniel. For 4 years. This wasn't about one night. This was about 4 years of me being erased, diminished, and taken for granted while I kept your entire life from falling apart." "I know that now. God, Maya, I know. The business is failing. Mom's reputation is destroyed. Madison barely speaks to us. Everything fell apart after you left, and I finally understood you weren't just my wife. You were the only reason any of it worked." "Is that supposed to make me feel better? That you only realized my value after you lost access to it?" "No, He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from 1,000 arguments. "I'm trying to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not seeing you, for not protecting you, for letting my family treat you like you were disposable. You deserved so much better." "You're right. I did. And now I have it. I saw your speech about building things when nobody's watching. That was about me, wasn't it? About us. Daniel, my speech wasn't about you at all. That's what you don't understand. My success isn't a reaction to your failure. My happiness isn't revenge for your mistakes. I'm not building this life to prove anything to you or your family. I'm building it because this is who I always was. You just never bothered to look." He was quiet for a long moment. "Can I ask you something? Did you ever love me? Really love me?" I thought about it honestly. I loved who I thought you were, or maybe who I thought you could be. But no, I don't think I ever loved the real you. Because you never let me see the real you. You were always performing. For your mother, for your business associates, for society. And I was so busy trying to help you succeed that I never noticed I was performing too. Pretending to be the perfect wife instead of being myself. "I've been in therapy," he said abruptly. "Twice a week for the past year. Trying to figure out how I became someone I don't recognize. My therapist says I have a pattern of outsourcing my identity to whoever's strongest around me. First Mom, then you. Now that you're gone, I don't know who I am." "That's not my problem to solve anymore, Daniel." "I know. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm just trying to explain why I'm here. Why I needed to see you." He took a shaky breath. "I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. That you were right about everything. That losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. And that I hope, wherever life takes you, you find someone who sees you the way you deserve to be seen from the beginning." Something in his voice cracked, and I realized he was crying, actually crying, tears streaming down his face in a way I'd never seen during our entire marriage. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he continued. "I just needed you to know that you weren't crazy. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't any of the things Mom said you were. You were extraordinary. And we were too blind and selfish to see it." I stood there, watching my ex-husband fall apart, and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a distant sympathy for a man who'd built his life on other people's foundations and was now discovering what it felt like when they all walked away.
Daniel, I appreciate the apology, I do. But here's the truth. I don't need it anymore. 18 months ago, hearing you say these things would have meant everything. Now, I've built a life where your approval doesn't matter. Your regret doesn't undo what you did, and your therapy doesn't erase 4 years of me being invisible. So that's it? We just never speak again? That was always going to be it. We're divorced, Daniel, or we will be once the papers are finalized. You're part of my past, and I don't live there anymore. For what it's worth, Amber left me. She's engaged to some hedge fund guy now. Mom won't stop calling me a disappointment because I can't save the family business. Madison moved to California and changed her phone number. I'm alone in that house, surrounded by everything we built, and none of it means anything without you. Then sell the house, fire your mother from your life, start over. Do what I did. Walk away from everything that's holding you back and build something new. You don't need permission, Daniel. You just need courage. I don't have your courage. Then find it, or don't. But either way, it's not my job to save you anymore. I turned to leave, and he called after me one last time. "Maya, I'm glad you're happy. I mean that. You deserve everything good that's happening to you." I looked back at him one final time. I know I do. I hope you figure out that you deserve better too. Just not with me. Back at the party, Priya found me immediately. "Was that your ex-husband? How did you—" "Girl, I Googled you when we first met, read the whole messy story. New York Magazine did not hold back. Is he bothering you? Because Marco's Italian and knows people, if you know what I mean." She was trying to make me laugh, and it worked. "He apologized, said all the things I used to dream about hearing, and I felt nothing. Is that cold? That's growth. That's what healing looks like. You don't need his validation anymore because you've got your own." She linked her arm through mine. "Come on, there's a journalist from the Financial Times who wants to interview you about replicating the Shanghai model in London. Your ex can stew in his regrets. You've got a future to build." The next morning, I woke up to an email from Victoria Whitmore. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I almost deleted it without reading. Almost, but curiosity won. "Maya, I don't apologize often. I'm sure you've noticed. But I'm writing to tell you that I was wrong. About you, about what you brought to this family, about everything. The charity foundation folded. Daniel's business is on life support. Madison doesn't speak to me. My reputation in New York society is in ruins. People who used to kiss my ring won't return my calls. I spent 63 years building an empire, and it took 18 months for it to crumble without you holding it together. That's humbling in a way I didn't think was possible. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm asking for advice. How do I rebuild? How do I fix what I've broken? I always thought you were weak. I thought your kindness was weakness, your patience was doormat behavior, your competence was luck. I was wrong about all of it. You were the strongest person in that house, and I destroyed you because I was threatened by everything you represented.
If you're willing, I'd like to hire you as a consultant. I'll pay whatever you ask. I need someone who knows how to rebuild from nothing, and you've done exactly that. Respectfully,
Victoria Whitmore. I read it twice, then 3 times, looking for the manipulation, the trap, the twist. But it wasn't there. This was just a woman who'd lost everything and was finally admitting she'd caused her own downfall. I forwarded it to Priya and Marco with the note, "What the hell do I do with this?" Marco responded first, "Delete it. She had her chance to treat you like a human being. She chose cruelty. Let her sit in the consequences." Priya's response was more thoughtful. "That's your call. But remember, you don't owe her anything. Not advice, not consulting, not even a response. If you choose to help her, do it because you want to, not because she's asking." I sat with it for hours, thinking about who I'd been and who I'd become. The old Maya would have jumped at the chance to prove her worth, to show Victoria she'd been wrong. The new Maya? She didn't need to prove anything. But there was something else. A lesson I'd learned from Maya Rodriguez, from that coffee shop on my worst night. Sometimes paying it forward meant helping people who didn't deserve it. I typed a response. "Victoria, I appreciate the apology. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, and I respect that you found that courage. However, I won't be consulting for you or helping you rebuild. Not because I'm holding a grudge, but because I don't have time. I'm building my own empire now, and it's built on respect, collaboration, and lifting others up. Everything your empire was never built on. My advice, for free, stop trying to rebuild what you lost. That empire was toxic, and it deserved to fall. Build something new instead. Treat people like they matter. Value competence over connections. Be someone your son can respect instead of fear. And Victoria, stop calling people who outwork you weak. That's how you lose everything." I won't be responding to any further messages. I wish you well, but from a distance. Maya Chen. I hit send and blocked her email. That chapter was closed, locked, and thrown into an incinerator. The UN Habitat dinner that night was everything a working dinner shouldn't be: exciting, inspiring, full of possibility. They wanted me to lead design teams in Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, creating sustainable housing solutions for rapidly urbanizing areas. The timeline was aggressive, the challenges were enormous, and the opportunity was a once-in-a-lifetime. We need someone who understands that housing isn't just about shelter, it's about dignity. Your Shanghai work proved you get that. Are you interested? Interested doesn't begin to cover it. When would this start? 6 months. You'd need to relocate to Nairobi for at least a year, with frequent travel to other sites. The pay is competitive, the mission is vital, and honestly, Miss Chen, we're your first choice. We've seen what you can do. We want you on our team. I thought about my apartment in Shanghai, my running group, my team, my life I'd so carefully built. And then I thought about the little girl who'd told me she wanted to be an architect, about the families whose lives had changed because of our buildings, about the work that mattered more than comfort. Let me discuss it with my current team. If we can structure it so I'm consulting on the Shanghai expansions rather than full-time, I'm in.
Consider it structured. We'll send you a formal offer by end of week. Walking back to my hotel that night, I called Chen Lu, even though it was 3 a.m. in Shanghai. "This better be good," he answered, voice thick with sleep. "The UN wants me to lead sustainable housing initiatives in East Africa. A year in Nairobi, potentially longer. It would mean stepping back from day-to-day Shanghai operations." Silence. Then, "Are you asking my permission or telling me your decision?" "I'm asking what you think. You gave me this opportunity. I don't want to abandon the work we've built." "Maya, you're not abandoning anything. You're expanding your impact. Li Wei can take over day-to-day operations. He's been ready for months. You'll consult remotely, fly back quarterly for major decisions. This is how legacy works. You build something strong enough to survive without you, then you go build something else." "You're not mad?" "Mad? I'm proud. This is exactly what I hoped would happen. You've outgrown what I can teach you. Go build something extraordinary. Just don't forget about us when you're accepting your next award." "Never.
You gave me back my life, Chenlu. I won't forget that. I didn't give you anything. I just cleared the path. You did the walking. 3 months later, I was standing in Madison's wedding. Yes, that Madison, my former sister-in-law. She'd called me out of the blue, voice shaking with nerves, asking if I'd come. Not as family, she clarified, as a friend. As someone who'd told her to find her own voice, and she finally had. The wedding's in California. Small ceremony, just people who actually matter. Mom's not invited. Daniel's coming, but only because he's my brother and he's actually trying to be better. And Maya? I'm marrying someone you'd like. Someone who treats me like an equal instead of an accessory. I almost said no. Almost. But something in her voice reminded me of the woman I'd been. Trapped, scared, desperate for someone to show her there was another way. So I flew to San Francisco on a weekend between wrapping up Shanghai consultations and starting the Nairobi project. The wedding was in a small vineyard in Napa. Intimate and beautiful in a way Madison's original society wedding would never have been. Madison looked radiant in a simple dress, no designer label necessary. Her groom, a public defender named Marcus, who looked at her like she'd hung the moon, held her hand with the kind of genuine affection that made my heart ache for what I'd never had with Daniel. "You came," Madison said when she saw me, tears already starting. "I wasn't sure you would." "You asked me to. That matters."
Daniel was there, keeping his distance, but looking better than he had in Singapore. Still broken around the edges, but starting to heal. He nodded at me across the ceremony, a gesture of acknowledgement without expectation. Progress. During the reception, Madison pulled me aside. "Can I tell you something? Mom had a stroke 2 months ago. Minor, but it scared her. She's in rehab, learning to walk again, and apparently having an existential crisis about her life choices. Is she okay? Physically, she'll recover. Emotionally, she's realizing she pushed away everyone who mattered and surrounded herself with people who only cared about her status. She asks about you sometimes, wants to know if you're happy. What do you tell her? The truth, that you're thriving, that you're doing work that matters, that you're everything she was too threatened to let you be." Madison squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I think her stroke happened because her body finally couldn't handle the stress of realizing what she'd lost. Karma works in weird ways." I thought about Victoria in a rehab facility, alone with her regrets, learning to walk again, both literally and metaphorically. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad that she'd wasted her life building an empire on cruelty and was only now learning what kindness meant. "I hope she finds peace," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. "You're a better person than I am. If she treated me the way she treated you, I'd hope she stayed bitter forever." That's the thing, Madison. Bitterness is heavy. I spent too many years carrying weight that wasn't mine. I'm done with that. If Victoria finds peace, good for her. But I'm not waiting around to see if she does. I've got my own life to live. The wedding ended with dancing under string lights, champagne that tasted like new beginnings, and a toast from Marcus's mother about love being a choice you make every day, not a prison you lock yourself into. Flying back to Shanghai to pack up my apartment for the move to Nairobi, I thought about how much had changed in 2 years. I'd walked away from a marriage with nothing and built an entire life from scratch. I'd reclaimed my name, my career, my sense of self. I'd proven that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's indifference backed by extraordinary success. The Whitmores had lost everything because they'd built their lives on my back. And when I stood up, they had nothing left to stand on. But I hadn't won because they'd lost. I'd won because I'd stopped caring whether they lost at all. My last night in Shanghai, my running group threw me a going-away party at a rooftop bar overlooking the Bund. Jenny gave a speech about how I'd inspired her to go back to school for her MBA. Alicia presented me with a photo album documenting 2 years of sunrise runs and bad jokes and genuine friendship. You came here broken, Jenny said, raising her glass, and you showed all of us what it looks like to rebuild yourself stronger. You didn't just survive your divorce, you thrived beyond it. That's the kind of woman we all aspire to be. I didn't do it alone, I said, looking around at these women who'd accepted me without questions, supported me without conditions, celebrated me without jealousy. I spent 4 years with people who called themselves family but treated me like staff. You all are more family to me than the Whitmores ever were.
Stay in touch from Nairobi, Alicia said. Send us pictures, tell us stories, and when you get back, because you better come back to visit, we're doing this all over again. Deal. Chen Liu met me at the airport the next morning to see me off to Nairobi. He handed me a wrapped package, refusing to tell me what it was until I opened it. Inside was a framed photo. The moment Minister Wang had stood up after our first presentation, the moment I'd known the project was approved. I looked powerful in it, confident in ways I'd forgotten I could be. For your new office, Chen Liu said, to remind you that you belong wherever you choose to build. And Maya, thank you for trusting me when I offered you this opportunity, for proving that talent always rises, for showing my students, because I've been using your work as a case study, what dedication and vision can accomplish. You gave me my life back. No, I gave you a chance. You gave yourself your life back. There's a difference. The flight to Nairobi was long, giving me time to reflect on everything that had happened since that night I'd walked out of the Whitmore estate. I thought about the woman I'd been, scared, diminished, convinced her value came from making others successful. I thought about the woman I'd become, award-winning architect, UN consultant, someone who built things that mattered. But most importantly, I thought about the woman I was still becoming, because that was the lesson the Whitmores had accidentally taught me. You're never finished growing. You're never done evolving. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment you start dying. I pulled out my laptop and started drafting ideas for the Nairobi project. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because this work gave me purpose. Because changing lives was better than seeking revenge. Because building something meaningful was more satisfying than watching people who'd hurt me suffer. The pilot announced our descent into Nairobi, and I looked out the window at a city I'd never seen, in a country I'd never visited, about to start a project that would challenge everything I'd learned in Shanghai. I felt the same thing I'd felt boarding the plane to Shanghai 2 years ago. Excitement. Pure, uncomplicated excitement about the future. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine, my lawyer. The divorce had been finalized that morning while I was in the air. It was official. I was no longer Maya Whitmore. I was just Maya Chen. And Maya Chen had work to do. Epilogue. 6 months later. The housing complex in Nairobi's Kibera neighborhood was nearly complete, and it was already changing lives. 200 families who'd been living in corrugated metal shacks now had sustainable apartments with running water, solar power, and community gardens. Women who'd spent hours every day hauling water now had time to start businesses. Children who'd studied by candlelight now had electricity and dedicated homework spaces. It wasn't charity, it was dignity designed into every detail. I was on site reviewing final construction details when my phone rang. Unknown number, New York area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maya Chen? Ms. Chen, this is Rebecca Morrison from Morrison & Associates. We're the firm you worked for before. I remember Morrison & Associates. I worked there for 5 years.
Of course. I apologize. Miss Chen, I'm calling because we're launching a new division focused on sustainable urban design, and we'd like you to head it. The position would be based in New York initially, with flexibility for international projects. The compensation package is, well, frankly, it's substantial. We're prepared to offer you partner track,
full autonomy over project selection, and a team of your choosing. I looked out at the Nairobi skyline, at the project taking shape around me, at the children playing in spaces I'd designed. That's a generous offer, Rebecca. But I'm not interested in returning to New York. My work is international now. I'm committed to projects that serve communities most people don't think about. We anticipated that. What if we structured it differently? You maintain your current work, we support it financially and logistically, and you consult on our major projects. You'd have Morrison and Associates resources behind your initiatives, complete creative freedom, and a salary that reflects your value to the industry. Why me? There are plenty of talented architects who'd take that position. Because you're not just talented, Miss Chen, you're revolutionary. You've proven that sustainable housing can be beautiful, affordable, and transformative. You've shown that good design isn't a luxury, it's a right. Frankly, you're the face of where architecture needs to go. We want to be part of that future. I thought about the Maya who'd worked at Morrison and Associates a decade ago, taking orders, designing lobbies, dreaming of bigger things. She'd have killed for this offer, but I wasn't her anymore. Send me the details. I'll review it with my team and get back to you within a week. But, Rebecca, if we do this, it's on my terms. I'm not interested in prestige projects that look good in magazines but don't change lives. If Morrison and Associates wants me, they're signing up for my mission, not the other way around. Ms. Chen, that's exactly what we're hoping for. Your mission is why we're calling. After we hung up, I sat on a pile of lumber and looked at what we'd built. 2 years ago, I was serving drinks at a gala where people treated me like furniture. Now, major architectural firms were restructuring their entire business models to work with me. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Daniel. The subject line, "No response needed." Against my better judgment, I opened it. Maya, I heard you're doing incredible work in Kenya. I'm not surprised. I knew you were extraordinary. I just didn't appreciate it until you were gone. I'm writing because I wanted you to know I'm doing better. I sold the house, couldn't stand being there without you. I left Mom's company and started something new, something small, a consulting firm helping family businesses navigate succession planning. Turns out, watching my family implode taught me what not to do. I'm in therapy twice a week still. Dating someone who doesn't work for me and actually calls me on my bullshit. Learning to be a person instead of a performance. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that leaving me was the best thing that ever happened to both of us. You found yourself. I'm finally starting to find myself too. I hope Nairobi is treating you well. I hope you're happy. You deserve every good thing that comes your way. Daniel. I read it once, felt a small sense of satisfaction that he was growing, and then deleted it. His growth wasn't my responsibility or my victory. It was just his journey, separate from mine. That evening, I met with community leaders from Kibera to discuss Phase 2 of the project. They brought ideas I'd never considered. Spaces for community meetings, areas for local artisans to sell their work, gardens specifically designed for traditional medicines. This wasn't me designing for them. This was us designing together. You listen, one of the grandmothers said through a translator. Other people who come here, they tell us what we need. You ask us what we want. That's why this works. That's why this works. 4 words that summed up everything I'd learned. The Whitmers had failed because they'd told people what they needed instead of listening to what they wanted. They'd imposed their vision instead of collaborating. They valued control over connection. I'd built my new life on the opposite principle. Listen, collaborate, lift others up. And it had given me more success than I'd ever dreamed possible. Walking back to my apartment that night, a small place in Westlands with terrible plumbing, but a view that made up for everything. I thought about the 2-year anniversary coming up. 2 years since I'd walked out of that gala. 2 years since I'd left everything behind. In those 2 years, I'd won international recognition for sustainable design, changed lives for hundreds of families across 2 continents, built genuine friendships with people who valued me for who I was, learned that success measured in impact matters more than success measured in dollars, proven that the best revenge is becoming so extraordinary that your enemies become irrelevant. The Whitmores had taught me what I didn't want to be. Shanghai had taught me who I could become. And Nairobi was teaching me that the work was never finished, the growth was never complete, and the best version of myself was still being built. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Maya Rodriguez. Saw your article in Architectural Digest. That little coffee shop owner is damn proud of you. When you're back in the States, dinner's on me. We'll toast to women who walk away and build empires. I smiled and typed back, empire is a strong word. I prefer building things that matter with people who care. But yes, to dinner. I owe you more than a meal. I owe you my life.
You don't owe me anything. You did the work. I just held the door open. That's what we do for each other. That's how we change the world. I put my phone away and stepped onto my balcony. Nairobi sprawled out below me, chaotic and beautiful, struggling and hopeful. Somewhere in that city were families who would move into homes I'd designed. Children who would grow up in spaces that taught them they mattered. Women who would have time to dream because they weren't spending hours on survival. That was my legacy. Not the Whitmore name or Daniel's success or Victoria's empire, but this, tangible, meaningful change in the lives of people who deserved better. The Whitmores had spent years building something impressive that crumbled the moment its foundation left. I was spending my life building things that would stand long after I was gone. And in the end, that was the difference between us. They built on quicksand and called it power. I built on purpose and called it home. Karma isn't about revenge. It's about consequence. The Whitmores didn't fall because Maya destroyed them. They fell because they'd built their entire existence on someone else's unpaid labor and called it family. When that person walked away, reality caught up with them. Daniel lost his business partner disguised as a wife. Victoria lost the competent daughter-in-law who'd protected her reputation. Madison lost the sister she'd been too cowardly to defend. But Maya lost nothing that mattered. She shed dead weight and found her wings. She learned that walking away isn't giving up. It's refusing to accept less than you deserve. She discovered that the best revenge isn't watching your enemies suffer. It's building something so meaningful that they become a footnote in your story instead of the whole chapter. The Whitmores thought she was the help. Turned out, she was the backbone. And when you break your backbone, you don't stand tall anymore. You crawl. Maya Chen didn't just survive leaving the Whitmores. She thrived beyond them. And that's the lesson. Your worth isn't determined by who needs you. It's determined by what you build when nobody's watching. Build something extraordinary.